my name is Katy Bellis. I'm a senior from the Washington State Junior Hereford Association. And today for the Certified Hereford Beef Cooking Challenge, we are going to be making what I like to call rancher's pie. This dish is taken from inspiration from British and Irish shepherd's pie, but instead of using lamb or mutton, we're going to be using Certified Hereford ground beef. This dish is made up of two different components with a meat, vegetable, and gravy filling. For the beef filling, you're going to need ground beef, olive oil, beef broth, onions, tomato paste, red wine, carrots, celery, garlic, flour, Worcestershire, black pepper, peas, corn, and then for your herbs, you're going to need parsley, oregano, rosemary, and thyme. For the equipment that you'll need for this, you're going to need a cutting board and a knife, as well as a 9x13 pan to cook it in, and a saucepan or pot to cook the original filling in. For the mashed potato portion, what we'll need is russet potatoes, 2 egg yolks, garlic, heavy cream, sour cream, evaporated milk, butter, Parmesan, salt and pepper, thyme, and rosemary. And what we'll need for equipment is a potato peeler, a pot to boil your water in, a sieve and a spoon or a potato ricer, and a saucepan and a stirring utensil, as well as, if you want to be fancy, a piping bag and a piping tip to pipe the potatoes on. We're going to start with the cream mixture for the mashed potatoes, but before we do anything, we need to make sure our hair is up, we don't have any loose clothing or jewelry on, and that our hands are washed and clean. What we're going to need here is a saucepan and something to stir with, our butter, garlic, rosemary, thyme, our heavy cream, and our evaporated milk. First, what we're going to do is crush our garlic. We have it peeled and any nasty spots are trimmed off, and all we're going to do is just kind of smush it down there. What that's going to do when we're cooking it is release a little bit more of those flavors and get that milk and cream to have a little bit more of that garlic flavor. Next, what we're going to do is get the saucepan up onto medium heat and just add all of this in here. So we've got all of our ingredients in the saucepan and we have it cooking on medium heat just until it comes up to a boil. While this is cooking and all steeping together, we're going to get our water started for our potatoes and let that come to a boil. And while this is all heating up, we're going to start by peeling and dicing our potatoes. So over here, we're just going to peel and cube our potatoes into about 1-inch cubes. It's really important that while we're peeling these, we are super careful that we don't get our skin, because that's going to hurt and that is not safe. So we're just going to be really careful to peel these potatoes and be really safe. Always peel away from you. You never want to peel these potatoes inwards towards your hands. So now we got our potatoes all cut up and peeled. We're going to add them into our water and let them start to cook. And while that's going on, we're going to start preheating our pan for the meat and vegetables. And all while that's happening, we're going to keep this cream on a simmer for about 20 more minutes. Make sure you keep an eye on it because it can boil over really easily. And if it starts to get too warm and starts boiling over, turn the heat down on it a little bit more. All right, we're going to add the olive oil into the pan, about 1-2 tablespoons, and then let that get warming up on medium heat. While we let that heat up, we're going to go over and start cutting our carrots, celery, and onions. So I've already washed off my cutting board and knife, and I've washed and peeled my carrots. So for cutting these, we're going to want to cut off the ends, and then we're going to want to mince them up pretty finely. So what I like to do is cut them in half, and then cut them in half again. And if there's a little bit thicker at the end, what I like to do is really carefully make sure your knuckles are kind of holding on to the carrot, and make another little cut so it's all pretty evenly sized over there. Make sure your knife is pretty sharp because that's much safer than a dull knife. And what we're going to do, we have our carrot cut. We're going to hold on to it with our knuckles so that we don't have our fingers hanging out to get cut by the knife. And we're just going to make pretty even sized little cuts on the carrot and move our knife all the way down on the carrot. My carrots are chopped, and we're going to do pretty much the same process with the celery. Cut the ends off, and then we're going to make a nice cut all the way down the center of it. And then same deal of just dice it up. Next, we're going to dice our onions and then add them to the pan with the carrots and celery. All right, I've got the oven on. I have the potatoes boiling. This has been simmering for about 20 minutes, so it's time for this to come off the heat. And the onions are starting to sweat and turn translucent, so it's time to add in the ground beef. So we're going to add in our certified Hereford ground beef and let this start cooking and browning. While the beef's cooking, I'd like to talk a little bit of why I chose this dish. Shepherd's pie became popular back in the 18th century in Ireland, made by poor shepherds as a very frugal and hearty dish. It was made using leftover meat and just covering it with mashed potatoes. Shepherd's pie used to be made with lamb and mutton because the Irish at that time could not afford the wealthy beef brought in by the British. So, with this variation, it focuses more on ground beef as a more popular alternative in the United States, as it's the second most popular protein behind chicken. And more on ground beef, it's one of the most popular forms of beef in the United States, with 30% of all retail beef purchases being ground beef. It's usually made up of portions of the chuck and the round, as well as parts of the flank, which are all ground up to create ground beef. And as beef prices rise pretty consistently for consumers, they rely on ground beef as a consistent yet versatile product that they can use for several different dishes, like spaghetti, tacos, and rancher's pie. Now that the beef's all browned, we're going to add in our herbs, our garlic, as well as our tomato paste. And once we got those added in, we're going to give it a nice mix and let that cook for about 5 or so minutes. At this point, we're going to have a little bit of stuff sticking on the pan. That is called fond, and that is what you want. That's where all the flavor's at. So we are going to deglaze some of that with red wine. Just add that in and mix it and cook that for about 5 or so minutes. So our potatoes are fully cooked through. So now what we're going to do is we are going to squish them into this fine mesh sieve into a bowl with our sour cream and our Parmesan in it already. So all you have to do for this is you just take a couple of potatoes, don't want to do a bunch of them at once, and you just press them with the back of the spoon through the sieve. And you'll just repeat that until all the potatoes are in the bowl. So we've had this cooking for a few minutes, and what we're going to do now is make a well in the center of this for our flour. So all we're just going to do is push a little bit out to the sides so we have a little bit of a hole in here. We're going to add in our flour, as well as about a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. We're just going to mix that up and slowly incorporate little bits of the beef from the outside. As we're doing that, we're going to add in just a little bit of beef broth at a time, maybe about half a cup of it or so, and slowly mix that all together so we don't have any lumps of flour in here. That's going to start to thicken up so we can add in a little bit more beef broth. And then I'll thicken up again, and then we can add the rest of that, and then just cook this for about another 10 minutes or so. Okay. All right, this has been cooking for a little bit, so we're going to add in our black pepper, as well as our peas and our corn. And we're going to give this a good mix, and then we're going to let that cook for another 5 or so minutes. Then it's just about ready for assembly. While the beef's just finishing up, we can go ahead and wrap up on our potatoes. So we already pressed them all through the sieve, and now we're just going to strain out our cream and butter mixture just to get all those large chunks of herbs out of there. Once we get that strained through there, you're going to want to make sure you scrape off the bottom of the sieve just to get all of the cream and potatoes off of there. And then we're going to give this another good mix. You might be thinking that that's a lot of cream and that's a lot of butter, but that's what makes it taste good. And this dish is supposed to be nice and hearty, so that is just going to contribute to this being delicious and filling. We're just going to give this all a nice mix together, making sure that it's not super duper hot, because next up we're going to add in our 2 egg yolks. Now the egg yolks, what they do is they provide some more richness and also a little bit of color and browning when we cook the potatoes in the oven. So we're just going to get this all stirred, make sure it's nice and combined, that there's no streaks of eggs, because no one wants to bite into an uncooked or a cooked piece of unmixed egg. So we got this transferred into our 9x13 pan. I added a little bit of oil to the pan just to make sure nothing sticks. And we're just going to level this out so it's nice and even for our potatoes. Now we're ready to put the potatoes on there, and if you're feeling fancy, you can pipe them on there. What I do is I fold the end of the piping bag down over my hand, and I just use a spoon and spoon it in there, scrape it off with my thumb. It makes way less mess. And the pattern that we're gonna do, just do a nice little spiral pattern to cover the length and the entirety of the surface of this. So give a nice twist, use a big piping tip, and we just go and we make that pattern. Herefords originated in Herefordshire, England in 1742 to meet the growing demands for beef in industrial England. Known for their red and white coloring, Herefords are the second most popular breed of cattle in America, right behind Angus. They didn't come to America until 1817, but they quickly grew in popularity for several reasons. One of which is the incredible quality of Herefords, partially due to the meticulous records of their genetics, which is greatly supported by the Breeds Association. In 1881, the American Hereford Cattle Breeders Association was created, which future became the American Hereford Association, or the AHA. The AHA focuses on driving and sustaining the Hereford breed through genetics and breed improvement. These efforts have set Herefords apart through their production of delicious, high-quality beef, all while maintaining a renowned feed efficiency. The genetic quality of Herefords has been recorded for over 2 centuries and is evident in the quality beef they produce. Created in 1995, the Certified Hereford Beef Program ensures that Hereford beef maintains these high standards. Not every Hereford is classified as CHB. Beef must meet standards for choice or prime marbling, as well as ribeye, fat, and muscling requirements. This dedication to quality is why I believe everyone should eat Hereford beef, and is certainly why I'm using it today. Now it's time for this to go into the oven and bake. All right, it just came out of the oven. It looks really good. We're gonna let it sit for about 15 minutes just so it can rest and cool down. We've had this resting for about 15 minutes, so now all that's left is to plate it up. I'm choosing to serve this with a light salad, but it is a pretty hearty dish, so it will stand on its own. We're just gonna get right in here. It turned out great. Perfect. All right, that is Rancher's Pie. My name is Katy Bellis from the Washington State Junior Hereford Association, and enjoy.